All right. Well, let's kick it off with stand up. What'd you guys learn? How'd you do?
Hmm. The homework kicked my butt. Excuse my language, but the homework was kind of a little bit difficult to understand. But yeah, we learned about a bunch of stuff. Curl, fetch, promises, whole bunch.
Yep. Domain names, servers, authentications, URLs, IPs. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot of information. And
What was a light bulb moment for you guys?
seeing where and how it would be used to pull in information. If we want to reference something, we don't have to recreate everything and try to put it into our JavaScript and then link it or reference it. We can make that request and have all of the information be available and in real time.
Yeah, isn't that cool that it's like we've been making our own little websites, and we got them interactive, and we've been getting our JavaScript going, and now all of a sudden it's like, oh, this isn't just my code anymore. This is my code talking to someone else's code, and then based off of their code, I can make my code do something else. So I think that that's a really cool moment, and that's why I love the New York Times assignment so much, because while it's certainly tricky and it's hard to get working, it really opens you up and is a perfect example of how APIs work, right? So in my professional career, I've probably, I don't know, made 1 million API calls, right? And that sounds high, but I've probably used 100 different APIs to get information back, to be able to integrate that into our own application. The API that I frequently use the most at work is the ALEXA API, and I dare not say her name aloud in case any of you have devices in your homes. That is a banned word at our company. It must be spelled out so that we do not trigger each other's speakers. But we basically have integrated with the Amazon API, the Smart Speaker API, to be able to have entire conversations with an end user using text to speech and speech to text. And that's a really cool thing, to be able to basically be able to wire Amazon system up to our system. And that's all done via API calls. So really cool stuff that you can build with APIs for sure. With that said, give me 1 minute because I don't have my phone and I got locked out of Canvas and I got to grab that. I will be right back.
Is Jordan here?
I don't see him.
No.
Canvas was like, it's been so long since we've seen you. We don't know who you are anymore.
It's been forever.
What else from last week? Were there any concepts that you guys wanted to review? How's everyone else feeling about APIs?
Could you review pre-flight requests, please?
Yep, we can touch on requests. Let me pull up our outline for tonight, and that's going to give us a little more direction in terms of where we are headed. Okay, so for once in my professional teaching career, I actually have Canvas up to date. The entire week has been loaded in. A quiz for this week and the homework assignment are all in Canvas. Couple reminders before we dive in. This week is fully remote, typical week for us. We will go until Thursday. And then next week we are completely off. So there won't be any office hours this week. And then that whole last week of the year, you guys have off. You also have off that following Monday, which is January 2nd, 2023. That is the federal holiday because New Year's fell over the weekend. So our first class of 2023 will not be until Tuesday. That is Tuesday, January 3rd. That week is fully remote. And then the following week is in person at Lemoyne. That is going to be in Gerwin Hall. I don't know how you pronounce that, but that is in person. We have a guest speaker coming in Monday the 9th from Red Hat, which is a very big open source software company. So please be in person for January 9th. Other days that week, you will be encouraged to attend in person, but if you would like to attend remotely, that is also completely fine. All of this information is probably easier seen from the schedule up at the top. If you go to schedule and YouTube links, you can see our breakdown here of where we're headed. We've got our first week of React. This is week 13. Then we've got winter break the following week. We are completely off, no office hours, no class. We come back on January 3rd. The second is off for New Year's. This is a fully remote week. And then our last week of React, week 15, will be in person. That's the 9th to the 12th. Any questions about scheduling? Okay. I don't know at what point it came up, but I realized that there is no way to ask a question anonymously in Zoom, right? Everyone has different situations going at home. Some people can come off mute. Some people are comfortable shooting the TA a message or dropping it in chat. But we're actually going to try a new tool tonight. So there's this link right here that says live Q&A. If you pop that open from Canvas, it's going to prompt you for a profile. Fill out your name here, and it actually gives you the opportunity to choose whether or not you would like to post the question anonymously or not. So I'm going to throw my name in here. I'm going to hit save. And what it brings you to is this box that says ask a question. And the kind of cool thing is you can either post it with your name on it, or you can change it to send as anonymous. And then there's no way for me to see it. I'm sorry, I'll see the question. I won't see who's posted it. So this is a tool on top of everything else. Feel free to always come off mute, interrupt, raise your hand, do all the stuff that you've been normally doing. This is just another tool. And you can actually see that comes right in as anonymous on my side. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on this. If you have any questions that you want to just throw in there instead of raising your hand, this is just a new tool for you guys to do that. We will try and do this every day this week, and then I will poll you guys at the very end to see if this is something that we use, is worthwhile, isn't, that kind of stuff. I know sometimes it can be intimidating asking a question, or you don't really, you're kind of afraid. You're like, I want the answer to this, but I don't want anyone to think I'm dumb, right? And that's what this tool is really for, is to be able to post that either anonymously or associate your name with it. And hopefully this helps out students who, are engaged with class, but maybe don't have their video on or don't have their microphone on. This is a great way for us to know, hey, you're listening, you're following along, you're asking questions, all of that stuff. So I will have this up on my monitor when questions come in. Doug also has access to that. Doug is covering for Mel. Mel will be in the rest of the week as your TA, but Doug is in for just tonight.
Also, I just wanted to say that Mel is graduating from a Python class that he took through Area 21. So if he comes in tomorrow, if you want to congratulate him.
Absolutely. Great point. Okay. With all of that said, I have poll for you guys. We've got two options for kicking it off tonight. We can either go right into the terminal and start learning some stuff there, reviewing probably what you've covered with Ryan a little bit, going over some common commands, and then diving right into React. Or I have an API project that you guys can get a little bit more practice with. We will cover both async await and promises on that. And that will probably take us about half the class. So I'm going to leave the option in your hands. I just launched a poll in Zoom, and you guys can vote on whether or not you want to do one more API project together, get a little bit more practice, or if you want to go right into the terminal and React and keep on learning new stuff. Everyone a minute to vote in that. Going once, going twice. And with overwhelming majority sold on a fetch review. So that is what we are going to start with tonight. If you want to work ahead or want to see what the final version is that we're working on, I do have it linked right here. And of course, that didn't come up. If you are signed into GitHub, that is accessible and the code that we'll be using. Give me 1 second to sign in there. My computer really has been like, you've been gone for too long. 2 weeks off is too much. No access to any of your stuff. Okay. This code is accessible in that link if you want to pop it up. We are going to be working with the WoW API. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? No, not World of Warcraft. Anyone an Owen Wilson fan? So Owen Wilson is notorious for his wows. And so what we are going to be doing is, if you do a search for the Owen Wilson WoW API, this second link is going to come up with this onrender.com. Someone has made an API that is literally a database of every time Owen Wilson has said wow in a movie. Yes, I realize how comical this is and how stupid of a project it is. However, it is great practice on making your API calls work and getting data to show up in the screen. So we're going to be using this random WoW API endpoint. So if we click on this here, you can see all this information that shows up, right? And it's the movie that it was in, the year. It tells you the character Owen Wilson played. It tells you how far into the movie it is. And then it also gives you a breakdown of all of these MP4s. Well, an MP4 is actually a video file, right? So if we click on any one of these, it's actually going to pop up and play the short 1 little second clip of him saying wow in that. And if we go back, we can actually refresh this page and you'll see we get an entirely different movie. And if we click on the clip, we get a different wow from Owen Wilson. So this is what we will be building tonight, is a little page where we can click on the get wow, and it's going to randomly go out to this API, going to get all of the information, and is actually going to show that video clip on the screen. Any questions?
Max, excuse me.
Yes.
So when I click on that API, it doesn't look like how yours looks. Mine looks kind of like you can't click on, so it looks like that.
Okay. This is a little Chrome extension that I have installed.
Okay.
I will see if I can easily drop the link in. That's the one that I have. I will drop the link in Slack and also in the outline for tonight. What
Yeah.
this extension does is this is how you normally see it, right? But what this extension does is it parses out the JSON. In other words, you know how we did JSON.stringify and JSON.parse? That does it for you at the browser level. So when you go into this parsed view, you can actually like open and close things and click on the links and do stuff like that. So this is a free extension. I certainly recommend it, but it's not required, right? So you could come in here and just highlight and copy that and paste it right into a new tab, and that would also work. But I will throw that on the outline as well.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay. Let's dive into our project. So I'm going to move this off screen. I'm going to pop open my VS Code. I am going to open folder. I'm going to go up to my code and create my week 13 folder. I'm going to create my day 1 folder, and I'm going to go one level deeper than we normally go because we're going to be working on multiple projects tonight. So I want to do one more folder in my day 1 folder, and I'm going to call that wow. And that's what I'm going to pop open. I don't need to save any of the code that I have up. I'm going to create my index.html. I'm going to create my script.js. And I am going to start a live share and drop that in. And I'm going to link up my index and my script. No CSS for this one. We're just going to go pretty bare bones just to get a little bit more practice with our fetch, right? So my index.html, I'm going to use my exclamation point enter. I'm going to change my document title in here. I'm going to go into my body and I'm going to do a script tag with an src pointing to my script.js. And I'm going to go over to my script.js and add a console log in there that says hello. I will split my screen here, hopefully make it a little bit easier to read both files. I'm going to go live, and that's going to pull up my white screen. I'm going to go into the console. I'm going to make sure I have my hello, and I am all set and good to go there. I will quickly start a poll just to make sure everyone has a minute to get their files set up. Again, we just have an index.html and a script.js. We added our script tag in to our HTML. We added a console login here. We came back over to our browser after we went live, made sure I got hello in my console, and we are all ready to rock and roll. Any questions before we dive in? Okay, so we are going to approach this 2 ways. The first way we're going to write it is the way that I think is easier to understand it. That's with async and await. We are then going to go through it with promises and .then, and you guys will have an opportunity to see both ways we're going to accomplish this call. So the nice thing about the Owen Wilson API is that there is no authentication. So when you guys are working on New York Times doesn't just hand over their entire bestsellers list. They actually want to know who you are as a developer before you start accessing it, right? So if you have started on your homework that was due on yesterday on Sunday, and you got stuck right at that first API call, the hint that I will give you guys that I hope Ryan gave you is you have to figure out the authentication. You got to figure out, how do I go to the New York Times, ask them for an API key in order to authenticate with them and prove, hey, I'm a developer. I would like to get information, access to your information. However, with Owen Wilson, we do not need that API key. And so what we often want to do is play around with our API, make sure it's working before we move it into our code. Now, I know you were exposed to curl, and curl is kind of that low-level tool that allows us at the operating system level, at the terminal level, the ability to go out on the internet and pull in information from that URL. However, if you struggled there, that's okay. Curl is not widely used unless you're in a DevOps leaning role. However, Postman is a tool that is used all the time, and that's worth reviewing. So I'm going to pop open my Postman. And okay, what we want to do is just test here, right? We want to make sure that we understand all the parameters of how this API is working. So I'm going to go up into a new tab, and it needs to know, hey, what's your request URL, right? Where are you trying to go? Now, oftentimes, we can just go to our browser. And do what we did before, right? We clicked on this link, and that popped us open into all of the data that we were looking to get. The problem with this approach is that this only works on GET requests, right? We see the word GET right there. That's telling us the type of the method used to retrieve that data. Web browsers, whenever we put a URL up at the top here, whether it's something like the Owen Wilson WoW API or something as simple as Google, that is always making a GET request. If we ever need to do something outside of a GET request, like a post or a delete or a put or any of those methods, we can't pull that off unless we either go write our own JavaScript code, or we use a tool like Postman to be able to emulate that post or that put or the delete or whatever method we would like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to say copy link address. And I will dump this link in the chat and in Slack as well. Okay, so I'm going to right click on this GET request. I'm going to come back over to my Postman, and I'm going to tell Postman where I would like it to get that data from. I'm going to say GET. Now, how do I know it's a GET request? Because the API documentation is telling me it's a GET. And when I hit send on that, I get all of this information back. And this is going to be our source of truth, right? This is the data that we're going to reference in order to figure out what information do we have access to and how can we display it to the end user. Okay, so we come over to our code. We've got it working in Postman. We've got in general the data that we need. Now we've got to get it working in our own code. So we're going to start with the async await method. So what we're going to do is we're going to say const make API call is equal to an asynchronous function that takes no parameters. And then because we made this function, we also have to call this function. So I'm going to say make API call. Now, inside our API call, what method do we use to execute an API call or function or request?
Is it a get?
Fetch.
Get is the method that we're going to use, but fetch is the name of the function that's built into the web browser. So what we're going to do is when we say fetch, it needs to know what information do we want to fetch. What we want to fetch, the first parameter, is our WoW API URL. And we are going to store all of that in something called data. So I come down here and I console log out my data. And I go to my browser and I see promise pending. One of the most frustrating things to get, because you're like, where's my data? Told you to fetch it. Where did my data go? What are the two ways to solve a promise pending to actually get the data outside of it?
Promise dot then.
That's one. And the other, we just tell the promise to wait until the data's there. So we can't use this await keyword. This should be a throwback all the way back to that terminal calculator we made, right? And we said, hey, we're prompting the user for something, but we want to wait on our code. We want our code to wait for the user to enter the number before we move forward. The same thing goes here. We can only use this await keyword if the function that it is in has asynchronous. We basically have to give the computer a heads up. Hey, there is some asynchronous code that's going to be running here. And now that I've told you that, I can tell you that this fetch is going to go be a promise. But when it comes back, just wait for the data to be there. Wait for the API call to finish, and then give me access to the data. So I will also do an example with a dot then after we get our first version working, so you can see the two different versions of it. So I'm going to save that. I come over here, and now in here, I don't have a promise pending anymore because I told it to wait for that promise to have the data inside of it. Now that that promise resolved, now that that's available, I can open up my response, and I've got all kinds of stuff in here. And if I look inside my body, it's this weird readable stream. I'm like, okay, cool. We 200'd. We learned all about status codes and networking and headers and all of that stuff. But where's my data? Well, it's supposed to be in the body, but I don't see anything in there. What do we do to make this, actually, let's call this response. It'll be a little bit more clear. How do we get the data out of our response?
Dot text.
We can do a dot text. So if we do dot text, come over here, we get another promise pending. We're like, well, I know how to solve this. Throw in a wait in front of it. We come over here, boom. We got all of our text in there.
Max,
But yes.
I'm sorry, quick question. How do you split your screen like that again?
If you grab the tab up at the top and drag it over to the right, it will split the screen for you.
Oh, no, I meant like when you when you go live from your VS Code.
The console down at the bottom, you mean?
Yeah.
There's three dots right here to the left of the X. And then this is setting the position of the console. And I've got mine on the third option.
I see. Okay.
I personally cannot stand it to the left or to the right, which I believe is the default in web browsers, but you know, whatever works for you.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got all of our data here and we're on the right track, but this data looks like it's specifically formatted. What format is that data using?
JSON.
JSON. So instead of using .text, I'm going to use another method that is built in called .json. And what that's going to do is it's going to parse out the data for me. Now I'm over here, I'm like, where'd my data go? It's actually still here. If I pop that open, I can see I'm getting the data that I would like. So instead of just console logging this out, I'm going to say const data equals response.json. Wait for that parsing to finish. I know you're going to do a promise. I don't want that promise stuff. Just wait for the promise to be done. Store that in my data. Okay. Now we've got our data. It's in our JavaScript. We want to get the video showing up, and let's say the name of the movie also showing up with it. How do we go about using that data to get some information showing up? First, hold on. Before we go forward, any questions up until this point? Any of this a surprise? Any of this something that Ryan didn't cover? Any of this that you would like me to explain line by line?
It's not coming up in my, excuse me, my inspect tool.
Okay.
I'm
Do
trying
you
to,
have this make API call line down at the bottom?
I do, I'm not done doing the constant data info, so maybe that'll fix it.
So you will need a console log data down here.
Let's see, okay.
Success, or do you want to share your screen?
I'm just gonna reload it for a sec. No, I'm thinking it's a syntax issue. It usually is. Let me find my share screen.
Yep.
Thank you. I'll just move this over.
Okay, so the problem here is that you said, hey, make my API call. Is everything going on in here? So this code is a block of code encapsulated by those curly braces. Now you said get response, and it's like, what is response? It doesn't have access to response because it's not inside the curly braces.
Oh, okay.
So you want to move line 5 down to between 7 and 8. And then you should be good to go.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. Okay. So we've got our data logging out. Next step is coming over here and saying, all right, we've got to peel back this onion, right? We've got the data in here. And what I want to get down to is, let's start with the movie. I want to know what name of the movie came back from our API response. So looking at our first layer of the onion, what data type are we dealing with there?
Object.
An array.
Looks like an object, but they're tricking you there.
Oh,
That
in an array.
object is inside the array. So
Mhm.
what we need to do is bury down into that. Now, why did they return it as an array? Well, hypothetically, they could return multiple movies to us, right? If we get a random wow, we're only getting one movie there, but we may actually want multiple results, right? And this is all the documentation that's showing us how we can interact with their API to get different information out. So the reason why it's returning in that array is because there are other endpoints or URLs that would return multiple movies out. So, but in this situation, we only want the one movie that's in there. So because it's in an array, I'm going to say bracket 0, and that's going to get me in. And now what kind of data type are we dealing with?
Oh, now we have a string.
Not a string.
Object.
We have an object, right? Key value pairs. So I said I wanted to get to that movie, right? That's the information that I want to show up. So if I say dot movie, now I get Cars 3. And if I refresh that page, I get Hall Pass. If I refresh that page again, I got Cars 3 again. I refresh, not very good at randomizing, but I'm getting all of those different movie names out. Okay, that's kind of cool. I'm going to save this. I'm going to say const movie title is equal to my data square bracket 0, because we need to get through that array, and we were going into that object and getting the movie out. Now, how can I get this movie name showing up in my beautiful minimalist HTML over here?
And you set some placeover on the HTML that you can update the inner HTML from the JavaScript.
So we can say movie info over here. And I can then say, hey, I want my HTML, I want my generated HTML to equal an empty string. I don't know why I made it a const. That was dumb. I want to be able to update it. So we're going to make it a let. And then we are going to say, hey, with our generated HTML, we are going to add to it. And I'm going to use a template literal there so that I can have access to dynamically inserted keys. And from there, I'm going to add an H1. And I'm going to use my $ curly brace syntax because I want a variable to go in there. And I'm going to drop in my movie title. Can't forget my closing H1 tag. I save. I come over here. No H1. What's the final step that I need in here?
You need to select that ID and put it in there.
Get my element by ID. I'm going to get my movie info. I want to update the inner HTML of that to our generated HTML. And now I get my H1. And if I refresh, I get a different H1. And I keep going. I'm getting all of that. Okay. Pausing there. Let me poll and see if you guys have any questions. Hopefully this is mostly a review for you guys, but I've got the anonymous Q&A open in case you guys have any questions on that. Artrell, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm trying to see the total list of movies that you are using, because I'm still getting, I guess, just one, the Meet the Parents. Once
And if you refresh the page, does it change?
let me try. Okay, and then it says Cars. Okay.
So what we're doing is if you look at the API URL that we're using, we're actually asking them for a random one.
Makes sense.
But if we go look at our documentation, we can actually specify different information. We can actually get it by a specific year, or we can zone in and ask for just a specific movie. We can ask for a director. We can even say, hey, I want to see the second movie Owen Wilson was in. I would like all of the wows from that. And if we pop that link open, we can actually see the second movie he was in was Cars. And this is the second wow in the database. So we can modify our parameters in here, but for the sake of just practicing, we're using this random endpoint instead, which is just every time we ask for a new movie, it's just picking a random one out.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Max.
No problem. Any other questions? Exona, go ahead.
Sorry, my Wi-Fi is coming
Killing you?
in and out, so it keeps kicking me out of. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my Wi-Fi is kicking me in and out of Zoom. So can you, by any chance, just do a little review on this, on this part, on the script? Sorry.
So in our HTML, we only did two things. We added our div ID movie info in here, just so we have a puzzle piece, a place that we can slot in the info that we want. And then we link to our script.js. Over in our script.js, we are doing it the first of two ways of dealing with a promise. way that I prefer, the slightly newer way, the way that makes more sense to me, is using async. And basically, we can't use this keyword await until we tell the computer, hey, there's some asynchronous code that's going to execute in here, right? Asynchronous meaning it's going to run in the background unless we tell it, hey, don't run in the background, just wait for that data to be ready. Wait for that API call to finish. So that's why we put it in this make API call. And then, of course, we've got to call that function down here. From there, we say, hey, go do a fetch request. And the fetch that we're going to is this URL that got provided to us from the API documentation. Once you make that fetch request, I don't care until you've got the data, wait, don't run any additional code, just wait. That wait is what is holding up our promise. That is saying, hey, I know you're going to promise me that some data is going to come back, but until you have fulfilled that promise, until that promise is resolved, until you have that data, just wait. And when you have that data, dump it out in our response. The problem is our response has all kinds of information in it. It's got our headers in it. It's got the body in it. It's got the status code in it. It's got all kinds of information. And we're like, what we care about is the body, and we care about the JSON that's inside that body. So instead of using .text here, we use .json, which is kind of like .text, but it also parses it out from that JSON string into the object that we want. So this is a 2-for-1. It's doing the .text and it's doing a JSON.parse for us. But because fetches loves promises, that JSON runs asynchronously, that JSON parsing. So we have to tell it again, hey, when you give me a promise, just wait for that promise to be resolved. And then once that promise is done and handled with, dump the information out into data for me. Now, from there, we did a console log data and we saw, hey, this is an onion that we've got to peel apart. There's an array holding all of the movie data. And so we go into that array and we say, go get me the 0 index, go get me the first movie. And then there's all different kinds of information inside of that object. And we can see that because if we do a console log here of our data bracket 0, we can see that there's not only the movie, there's the year, the release date, all of that stuff. At that point, that's just an object. So what we do is we get the movie property from there. We make our empty string. We start generating our HTML using the template literal, using the movie title that we extracted from our object array that's coming all the way up from our JSON. And then we take whatever got generated in there and shove it back into the inner HTML with the ID that lines up right here.
Okay, thank you. I'll just have to rewatch it because I got kicked out again, so it's okay. I know where you started. It was at 6:14, so I'll just have to rewatch it.
Is there a specific line that you need gone over?
No, it does make sense because Doug helped me with the homework assignment yesterday. So this does line up with exactly what we did with what he helped me out with yesterday. So I just wanted to make sure that I understood every single step correctly. But again, I'll listen to your explanation one more time once the class is over.
Cool. Okay, so the last thing I want to do is, yeah, it's cool seeing the name of the movie, but I'd like the little video clip to show up as well, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to, in our generated HTML, we're going to add something else on. It's going to be a template literal. And what we're going to do is use this video tag. And I would like the controls to show up on that video. And inside that video, I'm going to not forget my closing tag. I'm going to throw that in. And now I've got to tell it where to find the clip. So the source of the clip is going to come from somewhere. And we also need to tell it what type is the clip. It needs to know, hey, this is a MP4 file that I'm sending in. Now, if I go back here and I look at my console log data 0, I've got this infinite spinner going on, right? I've got that video player and it's not showing me anything. Well, I haven't told it that, hey, by the way, in this API request, in the response, there is another object called video. And inside video, there are a bunch of different resolutions in there that I can access. So to make sure I'm peeling the onion back properly, I know that this big object here that has all of the keys in it is my data 0.movie. I'm sorry, it's my data 0. So if we can pull movie out, it makes sense that we can get access to .video down here. So on my console log data 0, I'm going to add a .video. And I come back over to my browser, and now I've got this object. And I'm like, okay, so I should be able to go a level deeper. I should be able to say .1080p, and I got a syntax error. Does anyone know why I got a syntax error?
There's numbers in the string, so I would try to maybe use a bracket or.
JavaScript does not like object keys that start with numbers. So instead of using our dot notation, we've got to fall back to the safer, more powerful bracket notation there. So if I save that and come over here, ooh, it's an MP4 link. That almost looks like I could copy this whole thing, go down to my src tag, put in my template literal syntax, and paste in my link. So I come over here, and I got a really freaking big Owen Wilson. Okay, maybe a little too much Owen Wilson. Let's come back over here, and in our video, we can actually say, hey, the width of this, let's make that, I don't know, 480, and our height is going to be 320. Let's shrink Owen Wilson down a little bit. Okay, no escape, and I can hit the little play button. Got a wow, and I can go up here and I can refresh. Now I'm in cars and I can hit play, and I got another wow. And that is our Owen Wilson wow API. And pause there and let me start a poll in case any of you guys have questions. A specific line of code you would like me to go through, let me know. If there's anything that was surprising or not familiar here, let me know. We are going to go through it with the promise syntax so you can see the differences between those two, but we can start here. Anyone need help or does not have their code running and they think it should be?
Max,
No,
one more time.
you didn't.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, go for it.
Max, one more time. How did you split your screen again? I'm trying to.
Over here, it's these 3 dots.
I don't see the 3 dots. Like, is it like at the? I guess I'm trying
Did
to
you
figure out.
right click and hit inspect?
Right click. No, all I see is. Now this is on Safari.
We're in Chrome, but Safari should work as well.
If I right click, it says reload page, save page, print page.
You've got to switch your default browser to Chrome.
Okay. All right.
Safari has the dev tools, but you've got to enable them, and
I see.
you're not going to be lining up with what you're seeing on my side. We switched our default browser over to Chrome, I think, in the 2nd week.
Oh gosh, I'm at 2nd week still.
So if you go to Chrome up at the top, if you open Chrome, you can go down to settings here, and then there should be something default browser over on the left here. And we'll let you set it from there.
I see. Okay. Okay.
Jennifer, you were up, and then Exona, I don't know if you still have a question or not.
Go ahead, Exona.
No, I'm trying to figure out my mistake and I think I see it. Thank you though.
Yep, no problem. Archel, go ahead.
All right, so my console log is telling me I have an error on line 16 around space 50, and I don't know. I'm not catching it. I might need your help. It's
Share
broken,
screen.
Max. All right. All right. Here we go. So this is the error,
Okay.
and here's my line 16. So somewhere around here, I guess. And I don't know.
Would
You're
you
pretty good
bel
at saying.
So what do you think that error is trying to tell you?
Okay, so it's in the promise, it says, cannot see properties of null setting inner HTML.
Okay,
Oh.
so we see our inner HTML. Where is our inner HTML getting set on?
The movie info?
Mm-hmm. And where is that movie info in our, where is that movie info?
It's not anywhere.
Where is it supposed to be?
It's supposed to be up here somewhere. Okay.
Nope.
No, hold on. Oh, it's supposed to be in my index?
Uh-huh.
Ah. Okay. All right, I'll figure it out from here.
Right above that script.js,
Yeah.
we put in a new div with the ID of movie info.
Okay.
So I don't mean to be, I don't have a better word for this, dickish, but
No, you're fine.
that is pushing you a little bit now. We're at that halfway point, right? And so I'm going
Yes.
to do that for all the students as well, right? Okay, this isn't just about, all right, it's telling me line 16. Let me go to line 16. Cannot set properties of null setting inner HTML. Well, we know null means it doesn't exist. Where is it supposed to exist, right? Sometimes those error messages are actually more beneficial because it's the computer telling us, hey, where did it go wrong? And so, you know, parsing that apart, 14 weeks ago, you probably would have gotten that error message and said, I don't know, it's broken, I got to call IT. Now we start going, well, we know what null means and we know properties are, you know, objects and dot notation. And we start pulling that apart and going, well, what do you mean you can't find the inner HTML? The HTML is right. Oh, there's our missing div.
Got it. All right, I'll fix it on my end. Thank you, Max.
No problem.
So I do need help.
Okay, share screen.
I thought I fixed it. By the way, I got the mouse from work today.
Nice.
I made them order it.
Um,
And it says that it says that movie title is not defined at make API call,
okay, so where is that?
line 8.
Okay, so show me line 8. And we're saying movie title in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where do we define movie title?
Sorry, give me 1 second, let me push this. Where did we define movie title? Oh, at the top, const movie title. I see what I did wrong. I forgot to put the const. This is probably when my computer went.
And then the other thing, watch your line 11. You've got it like half typed in.
Have typed. Oh, .inner.html.
There you go.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
And you've got generated spelled wrong there.
Generated. Oh, right here.
Yeah. Got
Gener-
generatard.
I feel like one. Thank you. Perfect.
problem.
That was-
Other questions? Feeling like this is a good recap? We feeling a little bit more confident in, hey, make an API call, use that documentation. So the other thing that I wanted to cover, and we'll do this pretty briefly, this is the async await syntax. However, we can migrate this over to .then promises. So whenever you can use a .then, you can always use an await. And whenever you can use an await, you can also use a .then. I don't like .thens because they put you in what they call callback hell. Anytime that you get a result from a .then, you're moving a line indentation level over, right? Because you keep on going further and further inside the code. But I am going to show you what that looks like. I'm going to copy this whole section out, and I am going to comment everything out and put my code down here. Then whenever we see an await, we have to chain it with a .then. So I'm going to take out this await right here, and I'm going to say .then give me access to the response. And inside of that, I now have the same response that I had in here. So I can actually take this const out and take all of the code that was underneath it and move it into here. I have another problem. I have another await. Well, I can't get access to this data without the await here. So we need another .then. Then I'm going to get access to the data. And once I do, I want all of this code to happen. So I can take out my await. I can take out my data. If I come back over to my browser and refresh, it's all still working. Why is that working? Well, we, instead of doing our async and await, we moved our code around. We said, instead of waiting for this fetch to happen, do the fetch, and then when the fetch is done, give me access to the response. And hey, once I get access to that response, parse out the JSON, and then when you're done parsing out the JSON, give me access to it in the data. So, two different ways of thinking about this. We can say, hey, go do the fetch. Then when it's done, give me access to that information. Or we can say, hey, go do the fetch and wait for the fetch to be done. And when that fetch is done, give me the response. The only difference, these are both using promises. However, this .then syntax is the slightly older version, right? We're saying, hey, we want you to do this code. And then when that code is ready, give it to me in this function, right? As opposed to our async await, where we are able to say, hey, that code's going to run in the background, but wait for it to be done. And when it is done, dump it out over here. So this accomplishes the exact same thing. If it makes more sense to you using the .thens, go for the .then. We will be using the async and the await for any API calls that we're making kind of rolling forward. And we'll be making plenty more API calls because in a couple of weeks, we're going to be building your own APIs. Sure, it's great to be able to get information out from Owen Wilson, right? But Wouldn't it be cool if we could make our own database and store our own information and have our own front end code call our own back end code? That's where we're headed. But we've got this little pesky tool called React that we've got to learn before we dive into that. Do we have any questions on Owen Wilson before we put him to bed and give him a wow send off? Okay. We are going to move on to a quick little terminal review because we start cranking up the terminal here a little bit. We're going to be using the terminal to generate or create our React apps and projects. But because of that, I want to go back and I want to revisit a couple commands that are pretty common. So you could, in VS Code, pop open a new terminal window, or you can go into Finder, and inside of Finder, you can go down to your applications. Inside your applications, all the way down at the bottom, there is a utilities. And inside that utilities, there is a terminal application. The much shorter way of getting to all of that is if you hit Command Space, you can type in terminal and hit enter, and that will pop the terminal right open for you. I'm going to hit Command plus on mine a couple times to blow up the text. What is the number one rule when you are in the terminal? When we open the terminal, what do we want to keep in mind?
Where we are.
Bingo. Anytime we are in the terminal, we are always somewhere in the terminal, right? The terminal doesn't just exist in the ether. Whenever we open the terminal, we have what they call a working directory. A directory, just a fancy word for folder. Working, meaning, hey, where is this command working or running? The way we can tell where we are at is with pwd, print working directory. So if we run pwd, you can see, hey, I'm in users hackup state. Okay, that's my working directory. That means if I cd, if I change my directory, I'm always going to be doing that relative to what folder I am currently working in. But I have no idea what to change my folders to. I don't know what's in hackup state. So I would like to list all the files and folders that are in hackup state. So I'm going to run ls, stands for list, and it tells me, hey, here are all of the folders in hackup state. I've got my documents, my downloads, my movies, all of that stuff. I'm like, cool. But I want to get down to my code folder. And I know my code is in my desktop. So I'm going to cd with a space, but cd needs to know, hey, change directory. What directory would you like to change to? So I am going to cd to my desktop. Now, how do I know that worked? If I run a pwd, I can now see I'm no longer in just hack upstate. I am now in my desktop folder. Okay, cool, but I want to get down to my code, right? So I'm going to do another ls, and I get this long list of everything on my desktop. But if I start filtering through all of this, I can see at some point I've got my C4 my code. So I want to cd again down into that. I'm going to cd, I'm going to do my C4 dash, and now I can use autocomplete here. If I hit the tab key, it's going to drop in the rest of that file name for me. So I can hit enter on that. And now I go, just kidding. I want to be working on my desktop. How do I get up out of my C4 my code?
Does it involve a slash?
It does not. If I'm in this working directory and I'm like, all right, I'm in my code and I want to be back up on my desktop. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cd just like before, but I'm going to put 2 dots. The first dot means, hey, where am I currently? The second dot means go up one level from wherever I am at. So if I CD on that and run a PWD, I am now back in my desktop. So think about this in Finder, right? Every time you open a folder, that's like changing your working directory into that folder. And whenever we want to get back outside of that folder, we're going to do our CD space ... Terminal may be scary, but we want to get generally comfortable with it because we're going to need the terminal to create React apps, to start our node servers, to be able to access the database. There are a lot of developer tools that do not have a UI, a user interface. So we're going to get a little bit more comfortable with the terminal over the next couple weeks in terms of moving around, changing our working directories, moving up and down. So one thing that we can do is, in addition to our commands that we've learned so far, cd, ls, pwd, there's another popular command called make directory. That's your mkdir. mkdir, make directory, and then we can name our folder whatever we want.
Sorry, Max. When I'm in my terminal and I try to pull up the C4 folder from my desktop, because that's the only thing I have in my desktop, it keeps on not letting me. It says such file or directory is not available.
Does it have a space in the name of it?
Yes.
Okay, so spaces and the terminal do not get along. You can see when I just made my new folder, I didn't put spaces in, I used dashes instead. If I did want to put a space in there, I would mkdir, do max, and then before I do my space, I need to kind of tell it this is all coming together. So I'm going to do my / I can never remember if that's a / or /. The one under the delete key, not the slash that you usually use, and then a space, and then I can use spaces. So if I run that.
So should I rename it or should I call it like that?
You can call it like that. That's fine. Or you can rename it. Either one is a fine option. So if we go to Finder and we go to my desktop, we can now see I made two folders. Max is crazy and Max is a little crazy. Take your pick. We did that with our mkdir. But notice we're not actually in either of those folders. Our working directory is still the desktop. That means when we create a new folder, our working directory does not change to be inside that folder. Think about it as when you right click and you hit new folder and you type in the name and hit enter, that doesn't move you into the folder. That just shows you that new folder that you've created. So I can cd into my Max is a little crazy folder. And the last command we're going to learn here, we won't be using this one too much, but gets the point across. We're going to touch. Touch means create a new file, and I'm going to call this hello.txt. And it doesn't look like it did anything, but if I ls, I can now see, oh, there's a hello.txt there. And if I go over to Finder and I pop it open, I can see my hello.txt. So in tonight's outline, which hopefully I still have open, we went over a couple of commands. We did a cd, we did a mkdir, we did our pwd, and what we're going to get into after the break is npx. npx is a way we can execute a node command to create our first React app. The reason why this terminal is going to be important is because we don't want to just create React app anywhere. We want to create a new React app in a certain folder structure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out where I am. I'm going to do a PWD, and I'm down in my desktop folder. I'm sorry, I'm in my Max is a little crazy folder. I want to get outside of that up to my desktop. So I'm going to CD space ... enter. And now when I PWD, I'm back on my desktop. Okay, well, I want to create my first React app here, but I don't want to just create it on my desktop. I want to create my first React app in the folder for week 13, day 1. In order to find that, I'm going to CD into my C4 my code. From my C4 my code, I don't know what's in there. So I'm going to LS. It's going to show me all of my weeks. I already have my week 13 created. If I didn't, I could mkdir space W13. But because I have it created, I can CD into my week 13. From my week 13, I can LS and see, hey, I've got a day 1. I want to be inside of there. So I'm going to CD down to my day 1. And then I'm going to PWD and make sure that I made it from my desktop to my code to my week 13 to my day 1. Those slashes are signifying, hey, every time we see another slash, we're going into that folder. We're going a little bit deeper there. Has everyone made it to their week 13, day 1 in their terminal? Because you're going to be very, very lost after break unless you've got your terminal open and have CD'd down to where you would like your first React app to go.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm in my C4 my code.
Yep.
And I typed in CD week 13, day 1 and it said I had too many arguments. Is that because I don't have spaces in between them?
So if you're trying to move into 2 folders, you're not only going down into week 13, you're also going into day 1, right?
Oh. Yep. Okay.
So you can go into multiple folders in one CD command if you have them separated with slashes, but I would recommend doing one CD at a time while you're getting comfortable with your working directory.
String not in PWD. Oh, I got it.
Go ahead, share your screen. Let's take a look.
Like, ooh. I have to back up.
Okay, so we want to figure out where you are at. So we PWD and hit enter. And we go, all right, we're in our my code folder. Great.
Yep.
Now I want a list of all of the options inside my code. So we LS and we see, all right, we are trying to get to that week 13, day 1, but we've got spaces in there and terminal does not like spaces. So we've got to give it a heads up. Hey, there's a space in that file name. So we're going to do a CD space WK. We want to get, yep. Okay. Now nope, there isn't a dash in our file name. So what we need to use is the slash underneath the delete key.
Okay.
Now a space, and we can type 13, and then that slash again, and then space D1.
Okay, like you did for all of that. Okay.
Right. So because the computer is like, whoa, what's going on there? So basically that is called escaping the space. That's saying that space doesn't mean that we're sending in more information to the command. That space is part of the same folder that we're trying to get into.
Okay, awesome.
You learn very quickly while you're working with a terminal. It's just easier to name things without spaces.
Oh yeah. I can tell. Thanks.
No problem. So everyone made it down to day 1. Alba, go ahead.
I was trying to look at the screen, but
Oh.
it kept going away when I was looking at the screen.
So go ahead, share your screen. I can get you caught up.
I am on week 13. I just need to pull out day 1, but I don't know if you put anything besides just the calling the day one.
Just the CD space D1 or day one or whatever you have.
So hold on. So just CD space day one.
You got it.
Right.
Good work. Terminal is something I've taught many, many times. It's not something you can ever learn by just repeating commands. And that's a tough thing, right? That's something that I think you guys have learned from your code, right? This isn't a matter of, hey, let me just type in what Max has and it will all work. You've got to take that step back and say, all right, let me understand what Max wrote. Why did he write it? What's that telling the computer, right? Same goes for the terminal. If you'll get overwhelmed by the terminal if you look at all of the commands that are available to you. So if you narrow in on that subset of commands of, do I understand my PWD to know where I'm at? Do I understand my LS to show me what my options are? And do I understand my CD in order to be able to not only move into folders, but move outside of folders, go a level up from that folder? Once you get that navigation down, the terminal becomes much, much easier. But until you get comfortable with saying, hey, my working directory is the one place I'm at, right? The PWD is kind of like telling someone to turn right. And they're like, turn right in 300 feet. I don't know where I am. But if you tell them, hey, you're on the 5th direction, all of a sudden you can know where that right turn is going to be. So whenever you run that terminal command, it is always running in whatever your working directory is. Now, with all of that said, I'm going to show you guys one shortcut that's going to make you very angry because I made you just learn all the hard ways of doing this. I'm going to close my terminal and open a new one. And whenever we open a new terminal window, it usually drops us back at what we call our home directory, right?
Share your screen.
It's probably the only reason we pay TAs is to remind me to share my screen.
I'm useful.
Thank you. When we open a new terminal window, you can see it dump me back out in what we call our home folder, our user folder. And we can find that folder if we go into our Finder. And then up at the top, if you go and down to home, this is the folder that our terminal drops us out on. Now, as programmers or as end users of a computer, we're used to this, right? Go to desktop, go into my code, go into my week 13 and my day 1. Okay, wouldn't it be nice if we could cheat a little bit and just do a little CD in there and a space and come over to our day 1 and whoop, drag and drop it in. Now, if I PWD, I am all the way down in my day 1 folder without having to CD through all of those levels. Little pro tip there. CD space and drag and drop the folder that you would like to get into to make your working directory.
So PWD, and then you
Right,
literally
working
just
directory.
you want.
Well, CD. You want a CD because you want to change the directory into wherever we're trying to get into.
Okay, and I'm just dragging and dropping the folder.
CD space and then dragging and dropping the folder. Yes.
Oh, okay.
And then hit enter, and that's going to CD you into that file path.
That's cool.
Okay. We are going to create our first React project. We PWD'd, we're inside our day 1 folder. We're ready to go. We're ready to start using React. We're going to run npx. npx is like npm, except it's going to execute a command for us. The X stands for execute. And we are going to create -react-app. And we're going to call this playground. I'm going to hit enter there. And yours may say, need to install React app, create React app. Is this okay? If it does, you can just hit the enter button on that and it should get to work.
If it says okay to proceed, just
Enter.
hit Y.
Y should work, or just the enter key should work, or both, Y and enter. Give everyone a minute. If someone could give me a thumbs up when they see a screen that looks like this, because it will probably take your computer a minute to download React for the first time. Sona, you might be here all night waiting for your internet to download React for the first time.
I could tell. It's
Cool. Artrell made it, looks like you made it through. We're getting our first thumbs up there. Give everyone just one more minute, depending on the speed of your internet connection.
No, I can't get out of my other directory. I'm still working on that.
All right. So it says we made it through, but it's given us some instructions here. It's telling us that we can start a development folder, but if I just run npm start, it's like, I don't know what you want me to open. Well, what do you want me to start? Well, if we pwd, we can see we're still in that day one folder. Well, what's going on? If I open that day one folder, I've got my WoW folder that I was working on earlier. Now I've got this folder called Playground.
Excuse me, Max.
Yes.
It's asking me if I want to update. I guess there's an even newer version. Should I ignore it for now?
Does it give you, can you just hit enter to update it?
Let me try. No.
Did it successfully create your Playground folder?
I want to say yes. Let me share
Okay.
my screen real quick.
Go for it.
All right. Hold on. Let me lower my hand, screen share. All right.
That is fine. You can ignore that if you do an ls and hit enter. You can see it created that Playground folder, so you are good to go.
All right. Thank you.
Yep. And anyone else that says a new version of npm is available, you can just ignore that for now. Okay, so I ran my ls and now I see, hey, my Playground folder is here. Well, I didn't create a Playground folder. Create React app creates that folder for us. We said npx, so terminal knew how to execute the command. We told it what command we wanted it to execute, create React app, and we told it what the name of the folder and our project was going to be. We called that Playground. Now, what npx did for us is it made that Playground folder. Well, in order to be able to start the Playground, we need to be inside the Playground. So I'm going to cd into my Playground and hit enter. And now that I'm finally in my Playground and I run a pwd and see I'm all the way down in that Playground folder, now I can npm space start and hit enter. And if we give it a minute, we've got our spinning holy grail of React. Now, I can't show you the commands after I ran it, but again, you want to cd into your Playground folder, and then it's just npm space start, enter, give it a minute to think, and you should have a spinning React logo.
Mine says compiled with problems.
That's interesting.
Mine does too.
Mine looks like this.
Yeah, that's what mine looks like.
What
Same.
the?
Same.
I I can't get into mine yet because I don't remember the NPX line.
Uh,
I'm in my week 13, day 1.
we're gonna have problems. Jennifer, give me 1 second and I'll put the command in the Slack channel.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I could get out of this and try doing it
If
again.
it helps any, my
Terminal-
the terminal error says permission denied. The second error is module build failed, and some URLs. And the third error is permission denied. Open users, and it references some of my user folders. And at the end it says Webpack compiled with 1 error. I didn't even see you put it up. Thanks.
Well, crap. We've never run into this before. Welcome to the life of a developer, folks. Sometimes it does not go as smoothly as you would like. I'm gonna play around for a second. You guys want to go on break? You can. I'm guessing we'll be back around 7:20, but I need to Vig on the okay. But that's, oh no, it's all the way up there. You're gonna yell at me on this? Before I delete it, I want to look in there. Sudo cd into my config. What? How about, can you enter your Mac password there and hit enter? It's not going to look like you're typing, but you actually are. Okay. What? Oh, no, configs it. Our config is owned by root on November 3rd. Oh, I get to blame Nathan for this one. He was your instructor on the 3rd. Does .config ring a bell for anyone?
Yeah, it does.
Do you remember what you did with a .config?
That might be a stretch. Are you referring to like, so when Nathan, like around, especially around the time we started Homebrew, like we did a bunch of stuff like in the terminal and like with settings. Like I don't want to say that we definitely changed something that would have affected this, but
Like it is not letting me into that folder.
We did it to listing your what network interfaces. That's what we used it for. Sorry, I'm looking at the slides here.
Can you send me that slide? Like I can fix it, but I don't want to go nuclear and break something that is like already working. Especially before I tell you all to run that command.
So that's the document and it's slide 25. He had us run if config.
25.
I just searched up config.
No, that's a different config.
Yeah, that's all he had us do with config.
Okay. Yeah, if config is just an info command. This is it's a directory, but it won't let me. Can I get your Mac password again, Alba? Try it one more time. You may have entered it right, and it's just not going to let me do this. Nope. Okay. Oh, you're gonna let me in this way? Doesn't okay, you're gonna let me do this? 2.config 2.
Yeah, like I see some stuff on like Stack Overflow that might be related, but like you said, they're kind of like scary commands, and like I don't want to. But it seems like a somewhat like common issue, at least from when I'm like Googling it, but
Not knowing what I'm talking about, but is it possible it has anything to do with 6 high severity vulnerabilities that came up when I was installing React?
No.
Okay.
I appreciate you throwing it out, but I do not think that's the problem.
Okay.
All right. I know how to fix it. We'll go on break and then I'll walk everyone through how to fix that error. Not thrilled with the answer, but I have an answer. Jennifer, do you want to share your screen, or are you stuck at the same spot everyone else was?
No, I'm set. I'm at that spot. I'm just not hitting the start. I'm just waiting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Go on break. Be back at 7:30. And if anyone needs help, let me know. I can stick around for a minute or two, other than the error that everyone else was getting. Okay.
Recording is paused.
Thank you. Okay. I'm sharing my screen this time. I swear I am. Okay. So, what we need to do is there is some old configuration file that is conflicting with React. So we're going to just remove that file. The problem is we can't just delete the folder because it is owned by the root user on your computer. The root user is like the overlord, the super admin, the admin above a regular admin. So the command that we're going to run is sudo. That stands for super user do. Don't ask me why it's do, and it's just super user do. You want to be hesitant whenever you run a sudo command, because it is happening like all the way up at the top level. It's basically bypassing all the safeties and letting you run an admin level command. So we're going to be very careful here before we hit the enter button on anything. We're going to like check this command 9 times over. What we're going to do is sudo space rm. Then we're going to do rf for recursive folder, but we're just going to say remove folder is the -rf command. And then you're going to say the tilde, which is shift and then the button between tab and escape /.config. And I'm going to copy and paste this command into both Zoom and Slack. So if you feel more comfortable copying and pasting it, that is totally fine. In fact, I would probably encourage you to do that.
Max,
Yes.
mine said it compiled successfully and I've got the thing on my web page.
Don't
so
touch it. Don't follow me. You're good to
don't
go.
do anything.
Yes. This is only for people who have the error about a .config, SVG, RC, or something like that.
Okay.
So once you copy and paste this command in, you can hit enter and it's going to say password. And it's going to have a little key there. When you type in your Mac password, it's not going to look like it's typing. It actually is. For whatever reason in the terminal, there's a long history behind it, but passwords don't show as you're typing them like normal applications do with the dots or the stars or whatever. So you're going to enter your Mac password in there and hit enter. And that should bring you back out to Playground. Once you are in there, you should be able to do your npm start, enter, and have your spinning React logo. If you do not, this is probably going to be the most painful part of the evening, but I will go through one by one and help you guys get to that point if you don't have your React logo.
And is that sudo command from within the Playground folder specifically?
It doesn't matter on that one.
Okay.
That the file path I've written here is absolute, so it knows to go up no matter where you were to your home folder and then delete that config file.
Thank you. Thought I'd ask.
Good question. Most commands, the working directory matters unless you provide a complete path like I did for this one. Brian, did that work?
Yeah, mine is showing the spinning.
Beautiful. Okay.
Neutron looking.
We're on the right track. Artrell, go ahead.
Mine is not showing the wheel. I got a slightly different error code.
Share your screen. Let's take a look.
All right.
That doesn't look good.
I'll scroll up a little bit. So I did that correctly. Password. Then I did that. And then here we are.
Here we are indeed. I don't think you've done anything wrong. Why? I'm gonna start over from scratch. ls cd to your desktop, cd into your C4 my code, cd into week 13, cd into your day 1, cd to your Playground, npm start. You're good to go.
Thanks.
Don't know what you did, but sometimes terminal gets cranky and you close out and start over and it's good to go.
Fair enough.
All right. Does everyone have a spinning React logo? Does anyone need help? That config command was scary to run. So if anyone needs help, that's totally fine. Just raise your hand.
I came in rather late, so if worst comes to worst, I'll schedule one-on-one.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
All we did, Schneider, is we reviewed the terminal. Well, first half of class, we did a review on fetch and promises and async and await. Then we moved into the terminal and did a recap there. Then we created our first React app and everyone's computers blew up and went thermonuclear. Then we fixed that and now we are into React and everything's working fine.
Understood.
And thanks to Doug, that was also recorded. So you can catch up. Okay, so we've got our React going on. And if I take a look, what the terminal is telling me is, hey, you can view Playground in the browser, and your IP address to see this is localhost :3000. In fact, we've seen localhost before. Where have we seen localhost? Well, we've seen localhost over in our Go Live button. When I go live, I see 127.0.0.1. Well, that is localhost. Those IP address, that lines up with localhost. So much so that I can take this and change it to 3000 and go get my React app. Well, that's kind of cool, but why do I need that? I'm going to go to my VS Code. I'm going to go open folder. You guys can follow along on this. I'm going to pop open my Playground, and I'm like, whoa, you haven't seen files like this before. Okay, whatever. Let's just pop it open, and we're going to explore this. We're going to learn React together. But if I click on Go Live down here, it brings me to this weird screen, and it's like folders and a couple files in here, and I don't know what's going on. We can't actually launch React from VS Code. We cannot use the Go Live button down here. And the reasoning behind that is React actually takes a server to run. That code is getting compiled from a language called JSX, which we're about to dive into, and compiling it out or transforming it, translating it from that JSX into HTML and JavaScript that the browser can understand. But VS Code doesn't know how to do that. Only React itself knows how to do that. So what we're going to do is go to your terminal, and we're actually going to close out of the terminal here. We're going to stop our React server. So when I click on close, it's like, do you want to terminate this? Because there's a command going on. That's fine. Go ahead and hit terminate on that. Now, when I go back over to my web browser, I still have my spinning React logo, but the second I hit refresh, it says the site cannot be reached. React is now no longer running on our computer. Well, that's okay. And we went through the terminal route and we know how to CD and get it started. We can also do that from our VS Code. So in our VS Code, I'm going to right click and I'm going to open an integrated terminal. Now, something that you guys may not have appreciated is that whenever we right-clicked on any of these files over here and open an integrated terminal, you didn't realize that what VS Code was doing was CDing you all the way down into the right directory. And we can prove that because if we run pwd, we can see our working directory is that Playground folder that we opened up. And because this terminal is just like any other terminal, I can do my npm start command in here, give it a second, and my React is going to pop back open. And it will be running on 3000. So just because we can't use the Go Live code with VS Code, that's okay. We can still start React through the terminal built in to VS Code.
Okay, so I have to close the window I have open now
In
with-
terminal, yes.
in order to use it through JavaScript or through VS Code.
You got it, yes. React does not love when you have two projects running at the same time. And we'll eventually get into using different ports so that we can pull something like that off. But for now, yes, you do not want more than one copy of React running at the same time.
Okay. Okay.
So, sorry, but under the Playground on VS Code, what did you press in order for it to pop up? I really didn't see where you clicked.
Right click on package.json and then open an integrated terminal.
Okay, perfect.
And then when the terminal pops up, it's just an npm space start and enter.
So, and
Question, Max, is there any difference between the integrated terminal, accessing it the way you did with writing package.json versus the one that's in, if you go to view in
Nope.
the navigation, they're the same?
Same terminal.
Okay.
And you can go over terminal as well and do new terminal here. All the same terminal, all running the same, what they call the same shell or the same bash, which is basically what the operating system is providing, right? That's what's executing the terminal commands for us. And so no matter whether we access that through VS Code, through terminal, through third party like iTerm, all are executing commands at the operating system level.
Got it. Thanks.
All right, we all have React spinning. We all see you can view Playground in the browser in VS Code. We're excited to dive in. Okay. Oh, Archop, go ahead. I thought you were looking for Zoom and couldn't find it.
No, wait. So I refreshed mine because I closed my terminal, but now I need to get it open again. How do I do that? I'm sorry.
In VS Code,
Okay,
do you have your Playground folder open?
I do.
Okay. In package.json, right click on that and go open an integrated terminal.
Okay.
And then down at that terminal that popped up down at the bottom, click in there, and you're going to type in npm space start and hit enter. It's a command that will be etched into your brains.
All right, now I'm good. Thank you.
No problem. Okay. So we have our VS Code open. We know VS Code. We can actually go into our SRC folder, and SRC stands for source. That is a widely used naming convention in the industry. And we're looking in here and we're like, index. That index is kind of a thing that we know. And I open up index and I'm like, ooh, what is that? That looks like HTML, and ew, that looks like JavaScript, and I don't even know what this stuff is. Okay, well, while we're in here, index sounds good, but it's telling me this thing called app. And if we look, that looks like a file path to me. And in that file path, that says go get the app. Well, that's kind of cool. Let me go over to this app.js and see what's in there. Ooh. This is even more HTML, but it's all in JavaScript. This is weird. But like if I come over here, it says edit source app.js and save to reload. All right. So if I come in here and I write some HTML like test and put a span in here and say hello world and save, I come over here and there's my test, my hello world. Okay. So I don't know what's going on with this JavaScript out here, and there's a lot to learn, but we can kind of see this is HTML, right? We're used to HTML. We know how that works. And oh, you know what? There's a index.css and an app.css. Well, if it's CSS, I should be able to come in here and target my span tag and make it the font weight bold. And I come back over here and there's my hello world and it's in bold. I'm like, all right, maybe React isn't going to be so hard to learn, right? Just using CSS, we know CSS, and it's using HTML, and we know HTML. Let's dive in here. So this is the first time that instead of learning it through, hey, I know React, I'm going to teach you React. Instead, we are going to learn React through the documentation. And the reason why we do this is because you are bound at some point in your career, very likely in your first job, you will be asked to learn a new technology that no one has taught you. And you guys are all masters of saying, let me go to Code Academy, let me go to Udemy, right? Let me go find learning resources and take off from that. There are two different ways primarily that someone can learn. They and everyone is different here. So far, I've dumped you guys into the deep end and said, we're going to build stuff. And once it's working, you can go back through and pull it apart and be like, what's this document thing? What does get element by ID do, right? You've kind of reverse engineered it because you had to build something. You had requirements, you followed along with me, you build it, and then you go, all right, let me go back and let me figure out what we're doing here. Some people learn great that way. That's the way that I primarily teach. However, there is another way of learning, and that is learning the concept first. Let me go through the list of all of these concepts, feel like I got a good handle on it, then go practice each one of those tiny little concepts until I'm ready to build a project. We will start building projects on Wednesday, right? But over the next 2.5 days, we're going to be practicing learning through concepts. What the kind of cool thing is about the React documentation, it has recognized that people learn differently and given you 2 routes to learn React. One route is the route that I usually take of, let's go build something and then we'll figure out how it works. However, this time, we're actually going to learn the concepts first and then start applying those concepts. And the place we're going to do all of that, if you head back over to the outline for tonight, you can see we are just plugging away here. We did our module review, we did our terminal, we did our create React app, and now you're hearing this whole spiel of different ways to learn. Down here at the bottom in the resources, I added in that Chrome extension, and here is a little cheat sheet, not only of the terminal commands that we ran, but also a command line cheat sheet that's kind of like if you're someone who learns by printing something out, this is a great PDF on different terminal commands, how to move around. This is way more in depth than we'll be covering in class, but if you're kind of intrigued by the terminal and want to know what power is available to you there, you can definitely come in here and check out some of those commands. But what I want to focus on is I have a link to the React concepts. If we pop this up, this is React. React is a JavaScript framework. What's a framework? It just means that it's easier for us to accomplish certain things because pre-built tools have been made for us, right? Think about this as when you are an electrician and you're coming in, you want the framework of the house to be done already, right? You're not building with wood, you're not laying the foundation. You want that framework to be done so you can come in and do your job. That's exactly what React does for us. React is like a toolkit that allows us to build things faster because React has already built things under the hood for us to use. Now, in React, there are 2 sections. One is the documentation. That's going to be the conceptual approach that we're taking. Hey, let's play around with these ideas. Let's make sure we understand what they're saying. However, if you are the person who goes, just let me at it, I want to build something, tell me how to build. They also have a tutorial up here that gives you the a whole breakdown. And I love this about their documentation. Literally in the first paragraph, it says, this is the tutorial for learning, for people who learn by doing. If you are someone who learns conceptual, go step by step. Otherwise, this is complementary to the concepts and the documentation that we're going to be going through. So just want to expose that for you guys. If you want to run through the tutorial on your own time, that's totally fine. We not only have all of this week, then winter break, we have 2 more weeks of React after that. And then we have a whole project week. And that project week is going to be devoted to capstone time for you guys to take everything you've built and move it into React, because React is a requirement for the capstone. And we're going to be doing that together because everyone's project is a little different. So React is one of those things that if you look at this docs list and you go into the main concepts, there are only 12 things in here. Those 12 things are going to fly by you It's going to start to soak in a little bit, and then we're going to hit the ground running with projects, and that's when it's going to start to click. With all of that said, we used this approach last year, and I am pretty sure Doug now knows more about React than I do, and I use React every day at work. So this method is a little different, but you may find that this learning method is the one that resonates for you. And I know Ariel was just on the call back in cohort 2. She got to this point and was like, this is not for me. I'm not going to make it. I'm on academic warning. I'm panicking. JavaScript went way over my head. APIs confused the crap out of me. I don't know if this is for me. And React kicked in, and she was like, oh, it all makes sense now. It all connects. This is some HTML over here, some JavaScript. We get the data. We get the data to show up. This all makes sense. So React may be that moment for you where something clicks and you go, I got HTML in its own little bubble, and I got JavaScript in its own little bubble, and I got my API stuff over here. React is kind of the glue that helps bring all of that together in an app. So some things that we're going to be building. Once we get through the concepts, on Wednesday, we're going to start building a to-do list app. It will be your homework to practice with that and add in some functionality on top of the application that we're going to be creating in class. We will build a chat app that you will be totally sick of and ready to kill me when I say, guess what's back? Because the chat app comes back and back and back. The chat app, we start out in React. We start layering in our data. Then we start making API calls. Then we start using data stores, and then we layer in the database. So the chat app is the one that you are going to want to die because it keeps on coming back up. We are going to revisit the weather app that we already built, and we're going to practice moving that over to React. So you have practice for, hey, all my capstone stuff that I've already built, we're going to pull that over. We are going to spend time on a blog, right? We're going to revisit our blog project, and we're going to see how we can bring in efficiencies in React to make our vanilla JavaScript even easier to execute and build a project. And then finally, we're going to go back to our portfolio site, and we're going to get practice with routing and storing data in order to build an entire web application. Right? And so up until this point, we've been largely building websites. Websites tend to be static content. They may have an API call or two, but the difference is we are now entering web app territory. That means that a user is interacting. The user can maybe post their own content or do a search, or we're crossing that threshold where this isn't just about a user reading information and being happy with your site. This is now engaging in a new level of interaction. And you know what? We've done inner HTML, and we've gotten dynamic things, and we've put it on the page, right? You guys, for your New York Times assignment, you're getting data and you're making something dynamically from the New York Times. React is going to provide you several tools like returns, like reusable components, and this cool idea called state, which is going to make it much easier for you to say, I've got this one thing here, and if I provide you this data via properties, what we can do is render out all of that information and more tightly integrate our data into our dynamic JavaScript that we will be writing. With all of that said, does anyone have questions before we dive in here? Or are we on the hype level? Did I get you up a level or two? You guys excited? You guys like it's 8 o'clock? Just hurry up and get through this. Okay. Okay, so let's go through section by section here. First section says you can use as little React as you want. The idea there is they're trying to convey that you can just drop React into a project and use it only on a couple snippets or components. In reality, that is very rarely used. When a company commits to React as their technology, they tend to build all future applications completely in React. React is complementary to your backend and database. So a full stack, taking it all the way back to week one, is our front end, our back end, and our database. We've used vanilla JavaScript so far. React is a framework that is complementary to JavaScript. In fact, most of it is written in JavaScript. Some other frameworks that you may have heard of: Angular. Angular is Google's version of React. It is the second most popular web front-end framework. Vue.js is a one that has been growing in popularity. And then the kind of old geezer in the room is jQuery. jQuery was a framework that was dominant for almost 2 decades. It was when you were writing JavaScript code, the first thing you did was you dropped in jQuery, right? Just like we reach for Bootstrap on most new sites that we create, jQuery was the go-to JavaScript framework for 20 years. Now we have more modern frameworks like React, Angular, and Vue replacing that. But I think it's important to give context here, because if you go out on a job interview and they say, hey, we're looking for someone with Angular experience, you can say, well, I don't know Angular, but all of those concepts are translatable. I know React. Because I know React, it will probably be easier for me to learn Angular. Okay, we already created a new React app, right? And we've got actually an HTML page that's handling all the script stuff. To prove that, if we go over back to our React code, and in public, you can see in index.html, there's already an HTML file generated for us. And if we come down here, we can see, hey, this is our div ID root. That's where our entire React application is going to get injected, right? That's kind of the equivalent of our document get element by ID. And in fact, I can prove that to you, because in index.js, we can see document get element by ID root. Okay, so that's what's bridging the gap. That's what's getting our root in our index.html and mounting in our React application in here. Okay. 2 ways of learning React. We already covered this. Beating a dead horse at this point. You can either go through the practical tutorial, build by doing, or you can go through concept by concept and then try and go from there. There are additional resources. They're trying to cover you for JavaScript as well, saying, hey, if you don't know JavaScript, you probably want to learn that first. It's almost like we have a set curriculum and have thought through how to teach this. Or Charles, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you posted a link to follow along, but I guess we don't really need it at this point, do we?
It is in the React Concepts link. I will also post it in Zoom. If you would like to follow along, it's probably a good idea. And let me also put it in Zoom chat for you. And we're going to be spending a couple days in this documentation. So if you're someone who's like, I just want to read ahead, you are more than welcome to do so. Okay, this is covering step-by-step. There's a list of recommended courses. If you're like, I'm not learning this, Max, I want to go check out other opportunities. This is all in the main concepts. React blog is talking about, what's coming down the pipeline. A lot of people are on that newsletter. So when new React features are available, you can learn about them. They're on Twitter, if Twitter is going to ever survive. Thank you, Elon. Versioning, and if anything's missing, you can reach out to them. So let's dive right into our hello world. So we're starting to see some JavaScript that we already know. Document get element by ID, right? That is vanilla JavaScript. But what we're doing is we're pulling in React here, and we're telling it to render something. Does anyone want to take a stab at defining what a render is, or what rendering does?
I feel like it does exactly what it sounds like. It renders whatever content you have written so it can pop up on the screen.
Yeah, it's kind of like taking something in a regular format that we can work with and edit with and display it, right? So we actually render HTML. Well, when we write our HTML, we don't want it to actually show the tags on the screen and the CSS styling and all of that. What rendering does is it is the browser that is taking that HTML and converting that into a pixel layout that has all of our coloring and framework and all of that set up for it. So that is exactly what React is doing here. We're giving it this HTML and we're saying, hey, React, you are responsible for rendering this. You are responsible for getting this out to the browser. So that's all there is in this hello world. All they're saying down here is you should probably go through some JavaScript and have some familiarity with that. So with all of that said, we're going to jump right into JSX. So most basic JSX, we see a const and we're like, that's cool, JavaScript. And we're like, element, okay. And now all of a sudden, there aren't quotes around that. What JSX is allowing us to do is store an HTML element directly in a JavaScript variable. JSX is really powerful because it brings the rendering logic combined with other UI logic and allows you to access things like events and state, in other words, the data at the time that the application is loaded, and allows you to display that by marrying our HTML and our JavaScript together. So that's the syntax that we're starting to see here. We can embed expressions in JSX. Think of this as a template literal, but directly in your HTML. So we can say const name and define a string, just like regular JavaScript. Then we can use a new variable, an element, and we've got an H1 going on. Okay, that's cool. But inside here, we didn't have our backticks. We don't need that $sign. Our curly brace is saying, hold up, even though we're in HTML land, we can evaluate that variable, that name, and drop it in right here. So when we actually go to show up this element, what it's going to do is it's going to show Josh Perez in the hello H1. Let's play with that. I'm going to go back over to my code. I'm going to primarily work in app.js. And you know what? There's a ton of stuff in here that is in my way and confusing me. So I'm going to grab this entire header, go down, and delete everything out. Okay, now inside of here, we've got our return. Our return is what's going to actually show up in the browser. So we can make our H1, and we can say, hello, Max. I'm going to save that. Ignore everything that's going on in the terminal for now. We're going to go into my tab and I see hello maps. Okay, but I can take that a step further. Between my function and my return, I can actually write some JavaScript. So I can say const name equals, and I'm going to put my name in there. I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to use my curly braces, and I can say name. So I save that. I come over here. Hello, Max Matthews. Okay, it's kind of cool. Got some JavaScript up here. And JSX down here is bridging the gap and letting me use some JavaScript variable inside my HTML. We can take that a step further. You can say const age equals, we'll say 1 + 5 because I've been using React for roughly 6 years. I don't know, just making it up. So I come down here and I can say, ooh. Okay, I did my age. I got my 1 + 5 here. Kind of makes sense. I put my age in here. I switch over here and I have my 6 showing up. Let's do my 5 + 1 math. Pause there. Make sure there aren't any questions. Launch a poll. Make sure everyone's following along. It's like we have mostly everyone voted in. Any questions on this, or anyone need one more minute? Yep, Jennifer, are we good?
It's still trying to show my WoW API.
Okay, so in your browser,
Mhm.
where it says localhost or 127.0.0.1, change that number to 3000.
I missed that really. I'm sorry.
The terminal usually pops it open for you,
Mhm.
just like clicking the go live button does, but you can also get to it manually from there.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. All right. In fact, we can take it even a step further. So we saw a variable, but we can actually declare a function and use the output of that function in order to control what gets called here. Because what's happening over here is that those curly braces are executing the value inside of there. So if we come up here and we say const, I don't know, name and age combiner, we can say, hey, that's equal to a function. We know that syntax. That's just JavaScript. That's just a arrow function. And we can say something like return name plus age. Okay, well, it's a string and we're going to concat that right in. That means I can come down here and in, I don't know, in an H2. Now I want to say, hold up, React. I'm not sending you more HTML here. I want you to execute some JavaScript. So I'm going to put in those curly braces. And how do we call a function? We say name and age combiner, and we put in our curly brace or our parentheses. We want to actually run that function. So I can save that, come back over, and I get Max Matthews 6. Kind of cool, making me feel like, we could do some pretty advanced stuff there. We could actually get fancy. We could say, if the age is less than 6, return out youngin. Else, return geezer. Okay, now this is probably a pretty poorly named function, but we come over here and I get geezer. Well, that's kind of cool. Now I'm controlling it. Let's make me a little bit younger. Now I'm a youngin. Convenient. It's almost like we can conditionally render some information. Kind of cool. We can even go a little bit further on that. How do we do an inline if statement? What are those called in JavaScript? Does anyone remember? Starts with a T.
That's a ternary operator.
There's a ternary operator. What's their ternary operator is going to allow us to do is to combine that right in line. If age is less than or equal to 5, then we do our question mark. So ternary operator, 3 parts, right? The first part is saying if something is true. And then we're saying if it is true, do what's on the right side of the question mark. So we can say something like, young guy. And then we do a colon, and that's what's going to happen if it's not true. So in here, we can say old guy. Now we can't forget our closing curlies here, right? Because our opening and closing is telling React, hey, there's some JavaScript going on there. So if I save this and come over, I get my young guy. I come over here and I adjust my age back up to 8. And now I get old guy. So JavaScript, the JSX syntax allows us to either get fancy with a ternary operator in here or any kind of valid JavaScript, or we can try and call a function, and based off of what that function is going to return is what's going to show up inside those curly braces.
Cool. Max, is it possible for you to do a live share?
Sure is.
Thanks. I'm having a hard time seeing.
Make sure I'm giving you the right link. Yes, there you go.
Thank you so much.
All right, let's see what else React has in store for us. So we can do if statements and for loops. We'll get into that in a second. We can also specify attributes as well. So let's do this. I am going to come into my H2 and I can put a, style is not going to be a good example. Let's do this. I'm going to do my href and I'm going to go to google.com. And I'm going to just say the word link. Okay, well, just regular HTML, right? We come over here. We look at our React. I get my link here. I click on it and I go to Google. But just like we can use curly braces to get some JavaScript value in to show up here, we can also do that up here. We can say const destination equals your favorite website from your homework. Well, from in here, because I have access to JSX, I can put in my curly braces and send in the destination. No idea what that was. Zoom audio just panicked. Okay.
That was probably me. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. No problem. It just came across as a very excited yell because it was a compressed gargle.
It didn't help that it was an Albanian. So that's probably why too.
Okay, so we come over here and we click on our link and now we go to the New York Times. All right, that makes sense, right? JavaScript up here, we got our value, we got our href, making sense. Okay, cruising along here. We can, I've already played around with this a little bit. JSX is going to prevent us from having any HTML running that we don't want actually to be running. So we can come down here And basically what React is trying to tell us here under the hood is React manages all of this data as an object. Because it can do that under the hood, it uses what is called a virtual DOM. In other words, where did we use our DOM before? That's our document object model, right? That's how we got our JavaScript interfacing in. But the problem is the DOM wasn't really built to be updated all the time. And so React found out it was actually more efficient for them to manage their own copy of the document object model so that they could update it more quickly. Because of that, the browser under the hood is relying on React to manage that document object model. And that's what this section of the documentation is trying to tell you, right? Is that it has all of this information about the element and it stores it as an object, just like the document object model does in our JavaScript. Okay, we're moving on. We're not going to move on. We are going to pause here because we threw a lot your way. You got JSX syntax where you're like, kind of weird, kind of funky, but I get it, right? Nothing's too big of a surprise there. We are going to dive into rendering elements tomorrow, and then we're going to get into some components and being able to reuse some of our code as well. So we're going to go the speed tomorrow. We're going to learn a little bit about the concepts. We're going to read the documentation. We're going to go over, we're going to try using a little bit of that, and then we're going to keep on going on the documentation. We have got one more day with that headed your way, and then we will dive into our first to-do list app, making our first React project, other than a playground. But before we let you go, hit me with some terms that popped up tonight.
JSX.
Quick question.
JSX.
Yeah, and
Syntax React uses that is combining powerful aspects of HTML and JS into one file and syntax.
Render.
Process of taking our code and converting it into pixels the user can see.
Ternary operator.
Inline if statement broken into the conditional, the true statement, and what comes out if it's false.
Not new, but async await.
Yeah, I didn't even get nasty in that definition. Anything else from tonight?
How about pseudo?
A powerful and potentially dangerous command that allows our terminal commands to run as a super user, short for super user do.
should we mention something about compiling? So that's a term.
Sure. Process of taking our code and translating it into code that is easier for the computer to execute.
One more that might help people that are oh, I didn't know you're still typing.
No, you're good.
But that are still dealing with the New York Times thing is the .json property on the response or the .text, but the .json seems a lot more efficient.
Combines parsing the response body from text, combines reading the response body from .text along with JSON.parse to return out a usable JS object. Remember, when we say JSON, JavaScript object notation, even though it has object in the definition, JSON itself is a string, right? It's text. When we call .parse on it, we're converting it from the string that's using that specific JSON notation and parsing it out into an object or an array that we can use.
Okay, so where does stringify come in then?
Stringify does it in reverse. Stringify takes an object or an array and turns it into a string.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Anything else for tonight? All right, threw a ton at you. Couldn't have expected anything else from me, right? I'm back. I had 2 weeks off. I'm refreshed. I'm excited. This is personally this is where it starts to get fun for me, because yeah, teaching basics is important and we got to get that JavaScript foundation and the HTML, and now we get to start building projects, and we start to get building projects faster because we've got the fundamentals. We've got all the foundation, right? The language is mostly out of the way. We're seeing the syntax and we're like, yeah, this is technically something completely different, but this is syntax that we have seen. So now we start to get moving a little faster. Yeah, more concepts to learn, but this is faster with the wind at our back because we've got through the basics, right? We are moving on from CS 101 and getting into that full stack. Hey, yeah, it's great to be a computer scientist, to be a computer engineer, but now we start to learn how to be developers. Now we start saying, how do we actually build things and be able to traverse that whole stack? So I know it feels like it's been flying. I cannot believe that we're already at that halfway point, but we are, right? This is where it starts to get more fun, where we start to be able to build things and move a little bit quicker. Yes, even quicker than we have been. But this is personally my favorite half of the program. So I've got nothing else for you guys. I will stick around for a couple minutes in case there are any questions. Otherwise, have a great night, and I will see you for React Intro Part 2 tomorrow.
See you. Have a good night.
Max, are there any will there be like one-on-ones available in that week off? It's okay if there's not.
I have my Calendly blocked out. What I would say is reach out to people before you schedule that week, only because I know some people are traveling. And if you would like a one-on-one with me, just shoot me a Slack message. And it's probably going to be one of those, like, I'm actually headed out to my family in California.
Yeah.
So I don't know what my availability will be, but I do know I will have my laptop, and if there's something that, you know, I can help you get unstuck on, I definitely would like to be able to do that. So I can't like say, oh, these are the specific times that I'll be available. But if you shoot me a Slack message, we'll find a way to get you into my calendar.
That's okay. I just plan on going over the API weeks just because that was when I was doing the overtime. So if there's anything that I needed a question about, I could just Slack it and it would be answered easy.
Yeah, Slack is fine. I can also I have a program called Loom where I can like record a quick little screencast and then you can replay it from there.
Okay.
So I can do that. And Ryan is also super responsive on Slack. So, you know, just shoot me or Ryan a message with questions, or, you know, if you really hit a point where you're like, I just need 15 minutes with someone on video, just shoot us a message.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
We're around.
Okay. I'll try not to mess with your holiday.
You're fine. And I definitely have a ton of availability for this week as well. So if anything pops up, feel free to grab me on Calendly.
Speaking of which, I have a one-on-one right now, so have a good night.
Bye,
Thank you,
guys.
Doug.
Okay. I have something really weird coming up, and I
Okay.
have to share my screen because it's like messed up. It shows my web page with all of this, and it's got
Okay.
this part too, but I don't know what the heck's going on.
Okay. So it's telling you line 9 is problematic. So let's go to your code and take a look at line 9.
Okay.
And what do you see on line 9?
Let's see here. Not sure I should have this.
You are correct. Okay, so now we've got a problem. If you look in behind the VS Code window, it's got an
23.
issue on 23, which means it made it to the end of the file and is like, I shouldn't be at the end of the file. So what I think the problem is you've got either one too many curly braces or not enough. So let's see. We've got our first curly brace here.
Mhm.
Then we've got this opening curly. Then we've got an opening and a closing, an opening and a closing, but we don't have the closing for this one because this function is part of this big function up here.
Oh goodness. Okay.
So
I need to put that in.
we're going to put one curly in there. And then before I let you go, we're going to fix indentation. So this is indented right. This is indented right. Remember, whenever we hit another curly, we go in.
Mhm.
So this curly lines up with this if. So this has got to come over. Then we hit another curly. So we went in. But this curly lines up with this curly. So we got to pull that over. Then we've got this curly over here. That should line up there. Now, when we look at this visually, it's much easier to say, hey, this const starts right here, and this is the end of it. That means when we get down to this return, it's easy to see, hey, this return is in the same block, the same level of this const and these consts, but they're all inside the function because we're indented one level over.
Okay.
So now you've got one more problem, and that's you are trying to check if eye color is equal to green. So
Yeah, I have to
whenever we check,
balance. Okay, yeah. I did have to type the 3. Did I write this correctly? That's the or, that's the ternary operator.
you had 1 equal instead of 2.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, you had 1 instead of 3. Whenever we're doing comparison, we use 3.
Yeah,
And then this is got to be a string, right? Because it's not the
Yeah.
variable green. So I put that in a string, and now you've got green eyes, and if I change it to blue,
Yeah, I messed it something up there.
oh no, you're good. Oh, you know what? It's probably my live share that's causing problems. I bet you that's it.
I'll close it.
There you go. So you got blue eyes now, and then if you come over here and change this to green and save, you get green eyes.
Ooh, I did it right.
You did.
Oh, cool. All right. Thank you.
No problem. You getting it? How you feeling?
Oh, well, I keep going back and forth between I'm an imposter